I'm Charlotte. I am a life and positive psychology coach, and I help purpose-driven professionals to love their work again, because I firmly believe that doing something meaningful to you should not burn you out. And I want to make burnout a thing of the past. And today I am joined by Simon, who, well, Simon, I will let you introduce yourself because your CV is quite extensive. So tell us a little bit about you.
Thanks, Charlotte, for having me. I'm really excited to be here, and I'm hoping you can hear me because it's flashing up that I'm on mute. So,
oh, I can hear you. Roshana, can you give us a thumbs up if you can hear? Yep, looks like we're fine. So I don't know.
Okay, cool.
Not on mute.
It is after 9 p.m. here, so I don't know what's going on really. Like, as a dad and a husband and all that, I'm usually in bed, so I'm breaking barriers just being here. So I'm really excited though to be here because I love talking about men's mental health. It's my passion, and I've lived with it for 30 years. But it wasn't until the last 2 or so years when I experienced burnout myself that I started to openly express it in a community space like this. So I'm really excited to be here, and I guess my journey is 30 years lived experience of mental illness. I only found social work in the last 4 or 5 years, and finished my degree last year, and I kind of stepped away from this old career that I had in the Australian Public Service to follow my dream and start a business that was dedicated to men's mental health. So I'm here in a roundabout circles. Yeah,
that's amazing. So you mentioned something there which I think is often a bit of a elephant in the room, which is around, particularly for men. I mean, women also experience this, but I think particularly for men, that sort of fear or stigma that they might feel about speaking out about mental health. So tell us about that, sort of how that shifted for you into a space where you thought this was something that was important to speak about.
Yeah, so I guess it comes from, like, I was born in the 80s, so I grew up in the 80s and 90s, and northern suburbs of Adelaide in South Australia. So it's very working class, it's welfare, pockets of welfare, people work in trades and manufacturing and all that type of stuff. And I grew up in a time when, we were taught that boys don't cry because men don't cry. And if a boy cried or got hurt, he would be labelled, as a wuss or a sissy. And even as gay, like that's what boys and men would tell you in the 80s and 90s. And so I learned to bottle things up, and I come from a very masculine household, so 3 brothers and dad living in the household as well, and we played a lot of sports. We played Australian rules football, which is quite a physical sport, and so you dare not cry on the football field, and or at home or even at school and all that type of stuff. But then I developed what's called obsessive compulsive disorder when I was 8 years old. But at 8 years old, I didn't know what mental health was. I didn't know what OCD was. It wasn't in our vocabulary. I don't even think it was in the dictionary, really, to be honest with you, back in the early 90s.
And I certainly wasn't aware of it.
No, and I didn't know how to talk about it. And like most boys and men, I just kept it inside. I tried to think my way through it, and that's really devastating with a condition like OCD, because you spend 99% of your time thinking about things, and it just gets worse and worse and worse. So 20 years later, I finally, my now wife finally, encouraged me to go and get help, because how I was showing up in our relationship and the impacts that mental illness was having on me. So it wasn't just OCD, it was depression and generalized anxiety as well. I wasn't in a good space. I was drinking too much. I was very moody, very down. Very depressed. And so 10 years ago this year, I went into that doctor's office and said, I think I've got mental health issues, and I nearly choked on the words that came out, because they were going against everything that I'd learned growing up as a kid in the northern suburbs of Adelaide, and I was saying things that men don't say, and I'd been putting off the saying for so many years because of things around the stigma around mental health and mental illness and the shame associated with it as well. But what I found over the last 10 years is that every time I talked about it, things got easier. So, I started talking to a psychologist and then a psychiatrist, counsellors. I've seen a mental health social worker, and they've all come with different perspectives on how they can help me with my mental illness, and particularly I think depression and anxiety has been what they've worked on the most until I discovered what's called exposure response prevention and found a psychologist up here on the Sunshine Coast, because I live now in Queensland, who does exposure and response prevention. So I started talking to him and seeing how that could help. And that's when I really started targeting the OCD particularly. But it all came, I guess, came to a head in 2020 when I experienced burnout. So I was juggling, full-time work, 9-to-5 job, very high KPI environment. I loved the work, but it was just taxing both physically, or not physically, but mentally and emotionally. It was a very taxing job.
Yeah.
And I guess to some extent physically, because I was sitting at a desk all day as well. So like, it's not exactly the best way to spend 9 or 8 hours of your day. I was studying part-time, a master's degree, outside of hours on the evenings, on the weekends. We had 2 kids under 3 during that period as well. And then we had COVID lockdowns.
Yeah.
In Australia, we had 5 or 6 months, that we would be locked down in home, and then we'd come out and then go back in again, and all that type of stuff. And I experienced burnout and ended up taking 4 months off of work because I just hit a brick wall, and it's like I became a potato. I just had no feeling, I had no emotions, I couldn't function. I was just basically just sitting there staring at a wall type thing.
Is that what really kind of told you that this was different to what you'd experienced before? Because I mean, for a lot of people, a lot of the times when you talk about the signs of burnout, they do overlap a lot with the symptoms that you might experience with depression. So was it that sort of numbness that told you that this was something different, or what kind of it must have felt different in some way, I guess.
Definitely the numbness and the absolute sheer fatigue and like with depression and anxiety, like part of my OCD is a high level of perfectionism. So I would set a bar of standards for myself so high that, and for 15 years, I could jump up and hit that bar every time and it was fine. But then when I hit burnout, I just couldn't even get my feet off the ground to touch that bar.
Yeah.
And, spending that 4 months, taking that time off and starting to find, rediscover joy, for example, and hope and light in the world, I set about starting Mindful Men as an Instagram page, and through that I found a lot of encouragement with the community around the world. They're like, awesome, a guy is talking about men's mental health, this is fantastic. And I got a lot of strength out of that. And so I just did it more and more, and I started the Mindful Men podcast this year to, I guess, give a voice to that platform, and it's just gone from there. And then I've fortunately finished the social work degree now, and I've just basically moved Mindful Men from purely a social media thing to my mental health therapy business that is dedicated to men here on the Sunshine Coast, or Australia-wide if you're doing telehealth. So it's that burnout story is something that, and that's why I said I've only been talking about it for 2 years openly, because I started adding in there, I also live with OCD and depression and anxiety. I experienced parent stress, as a dad with 2 young kids. I'm not perfect, and so here's all the stuff around my perfectionism as well. And so I'm just opening all these windows to what was very closed off part of my life for most of my life.
Yeah, and it takes a lot of courage to do that. I mean, even knowing that it is a common experience, that a lot of people have been through this, and it's something that I've certainly found since I started talking really openly about burnout, how many other people have been through that as well. And I kept mine a secret for a really long time. There was a lot of shame attached to it for me to begin with. The idea that, I hadn't been strong enough to be able to cope in this environment where other people had, and that I had burnt out, and that what I should therefore do is like never bring that up and try and, skirt round the topic, because I thought that people would think less of me for having gone through that.
Yeah.
So tell us more about Mindful Men and the mission that Mindful Men has, and then I would love to know the top tips that you have for anyone who finds themselves in a similar situation to you, or anyone who is struggling with their mental health or suspects that they might be burning out.
Yeah, sure. So I discovered mindfulness around the time I experienced burnout. The mental health social worker that I was seeing, she mentioned mindfulness, and like most guys, I kind of looked at her a bit weird. I'm like, that sounds a bit hippie.
Yeah.
I'm not really into this. And we started the whole gratitude journal thing, and I did that for a little while, but I found that I was just regurgitating the same three things pretty much. It was like I was grateful for my wife and my kids and having a job, pretty much. Even though the job was causing me burnout, it was it's one of those things that we need money to pay the mortgages and
exactly,
put the kids in childcare. And so I kind of fell off the mindfulness bandwagon, but it wasn't until later in my degree when I went and did my second placement. So as a social worker, we do like work-based placements before we graduate, and I did one in a private practice, counselling about 10 or so clients throughout the 3 months that I was there, and it's that I rediscovered mindfulness and more particularly acceptance and commitment therapy, and how mindfulness can be used to ground ourselves in the moment. Because for someone like me with OCD and anxiety and depression, like my mind races so fast. I feel like I'm thinking about a million things at once. And so being able to ground myself with my 5 senses, I actually found, this is actually a really useful thing. Maybe mindfulness isn't so hippie after all. And so I started doing it with my daily walks. I'd go around the block and I'd find myself, if I wasn't really there present on the walk, like if my mind was thinking about all the jobs I had to do or whatever, I would start brushing my hand along trees as I walked past, along the leaves, and that just reconnected me with nature in that very moment. And I go, okay, I'm here on a walk, let's focus on the walk, not on the jobs that I've got to do when I get home. And then I took that to different levels, and I found myself driving in the car, like the kids would be talking to me or my wife would be talking to me, but I wasn't really listening. I was just nodding my head.
Yep.
And then the moment that I recognized I was doing that, I started to, I've got the steering wheel in my hands, so just mindfully just holding onto the steering wheel and going, okay, I'm here in the car, I'm not elsewhere, I'm here in the car with my family, and that type of stuff. So I started to do those very little things. And I found that was a great way to ground myself and slow my mind down as well. And from there, I've then since gone on to see another psychologist earlier this year, and he reintroduced me to gratitude journaling, but in a different way. And what we did was, it was, instead of just thinking about 3 things that I'm grateful for, which most people really struggle with, he said, write down on a piece of paper each hour of the day. And in that little hour, next to each hour, write down what you did in that hour. So it could be, between 9 and 9:30, I'm doing a LinkedIn audio event, for example. And then between 9:30 and 10, I might go get ready for bed. Just something as simple as that, And then from there, you'll get all of a sudden about 10 to 20 things that you did during the day that you can actually go, I was grateful for coming on and speaking to Charlotte about mental health. That was something that really made me feel good, and I'm grateful for having that experience. Or something like, I was grateful that my kids sat at the dinner table and ate their dinner tonight without screaming the house down because they wanted to do something different.
Yeah.
And they're things that when a lot of people practice gratitude and they say, think of 3 things each day, you kind of automatically go to the big things and you forget all the little things in your day that actually give you a lot of joy.
So true.
And you don't really reflect on. So I've been using that one a bit more often, and I found it's lasted longer. And now I don't actually have to write them down. Now I can just think about my day. Like if I'm feeling like I haven't practiced gratitude late, I could just think about my day and go, okay, yeah, I've done this and this and this today.
I love that. That's
given me a lot of joy.
That's such a useful sort of, I don't want to use the word hack, but it's such a useful way of explaining it, because yes, there is so much evidence that gratitude, true heartfelt gratitude, can have a massive impact on the amount of joy and positivity that you feel in your life. But you're right, for a lot of people, if it's almost like a box ticking exercise, you're just writing down the things and you're not actually connecting with that joy and feeling it, then it really doesn't do much for you. And I have personally also really struggled with exactly what you just said, that if I try at the end of the day, I'm like, I'm grateful for my health, I'm grateful for my family, I'm, these kind of things. And it doesn't, you feel like you should get some kind of upsurge of thankfulness inside you when you think about those things, but you kind of don't. I'm definitely going to try that.
It feels like you're completing a form, doesn't it? Like you tick the boxes.
Yeah.
And that's why I never connect with it. And so I've been doing that type of thing. I got into men's yoga, which was a great mindfulness technique, because I'd walk in and my brain would be racing like most days.
Mm-hmm.
But then I'd find the connection between the breath work component and the mindful movements as well. By about three-quarters of the way through each session, I would find all of a sudden this moment of relaxation where everything just slows down. I can just be present in that moment as well. And I mean, I was like every guy there, I was as stiff as a plank. So our movements weren't very good, but it was just a fantastic way to kind of have another mindful release as well.
Yeah.
But these are just basic things. And then so what I've taken that experience through my own therapy and used it for mindful men. And I do this work with the guys that I work with. But we bring in acceptance commitment therapy, the values-based stuff as well. So it's identifying with our values, because a lot of people don't really sit there and reflect, okay, these are my values. This is what makes me tick, and this is what makes me jump out of bed each day.
Mm-hmm.
We live life on autopilot, and we don't really reflect on it. We might do it every now and then if you do one of those business leadership days where they make you think about what kind of personality you are, but it's very superficial.
Yeah, exactly.
So we go through a quite more in-depth look at our values and how they connected to different parts of our world. So as a social worker, I really love contextual social work. So understanding people in the various contexts in which they live.
Mm-hmm.
So it could be, how are they showing up at home in their family life? How are they showing up in work or study if they're going to do study, or in their social lives and so forth. And you can find that the values can be the same, but they can also differ depending on where that person is situated and what they're doing as well. So someone at work might really value high performance and getting jobs done, but at home they don't. That doesn't come out as one of the core values. The values at home might be love and relationships and communication with their family and stuff like that. So we do a lot of that type of work, and then we use that to set, I guess, value-based goals as well. So like, what are they trying to achieve through therapy? Is it, better communication with their partner as well? So we can draw on those values and work out little strategies that are mindful to get through those moments of pain, but also to come out the other side and go, okay, I wasn't showing up the way that I wanted to. These are my values. I'm going to start doing this type of action in response to try and now live by my values and improve that relationship in a way that I want it to be, not the way that it just happens to be because we're living on autopilot, for example. We just do a lot of self-reflection, because I find the moments that you start to self-reflect and critically reflect on life is the moment that the big change happens. It's the change where a guy might go, I can actually talk about mental illness and it's okay.
Yeah.
Or I can talk about, I'm not the best dad. I yelled at my kids. I smacked my kids. Smacking is a bit of a touchy subject, part of the pun, but a lot of people are trying to go away from that kind of parenting, but then they kind of slip into I was smacked when I was a kid. And then they feel terrible about it. So there's a lot of guilt and shame around that type of thing. Or, maybe they had a disagreement with their partner or whatever, and it's really bugging them, but they can't open up to their partner because their partner's going through a whole bunch of things themselves, like maybe burnout, for example. And so, just understanding how our lives impact others as well, and doing a lot of that reflection and goal-based setting really does work wonders for guys, and because it doesn't seem like therapy. It seems more of a coaching style model, and Australia's very, very much a sports orientated culture. So more of a coaching approach to therapy is something that guys really tune into, and yeah, that's what we do in Mindful Men.
That sounds incredibly helpful for so many people. I mean, I'm fascinated that you said at the end it's more of a coaching approach, because you were describing things that I do with my clients as well all the time. That getting clear on what your values are, and then I often call it like, it's a bit like a values audit, and you go through thinking, how are you spending your time, and am I using my time in alignment with my values, or actually am I not living, practically speaking, day to day, doing things that matter to me. And that can often be a really powerful exercise for people to realize exactly what you've just said, that they think they're living by their values, but actually they're on autopilot and they're really not.
Yeah, and that's right. And they could be like, pouring into the wrong cup and doing the wrong things that don't align with their values. And they feel lost and they lose that sense of identity. Like, I work with a lot of dads, for example, who, since becoming a dad, they've gone on autopilot. Maybe they've got a stressful family life. They just lose that connection of being a dad. So values is a great way to bring that back to the forefront.
I love that. Okay, so got a few minutes left here, and I do want to leave chance for questions if there are any from people listening. But what would you, if you were to give advice to someone who was feeling not their best at the moment, starting to wonder whether or not their mental health needed some help, top tip for them of what they can do today that will start to set them on that right path and really help them to start feeling better, what would you advise?
Yeah, the easiest thing to do is just be mindful of what's happening in their life. So break it down into things like, are you eating right? Are you drinking too much alcohol? Are you getting enough sleep? Are you doing exercise? They're the four big ones. Like, because you can do that at home without anyone even noticing it. You can kind of do a mental check and go, yep, I'm drinking way too much beer or wine this week, and I'm stressed. Let's cut that out and let's go for a walk or a run or whatever. And then from there, the next best thing is talking. It's talking about mental health. It could be your friend, your partner, someone who just has got a good head on their shoulders. If you don't have that kind of person, your doctor, because getting it out does help. It's the hardest thing to do if you've never done it before, but trust me, I've been on this path for 10 years now, and it does get easier. So do that self check-in, and then if you can, just open up to somebody you trust.
I wholeheartedly agree. Okay, so we do have, I think, a question here. Rashada, you should be able to unmute and jump in whenever you're ready.
Yeah, hi, thank you. This is really interesting one, the topic itself. I have a question like, Simon, have you received this similar question that, one of my colleague or brother or, acquaintance, there is a guy who I know that he needs help, but he's so stubborn to accept that he does need help and he should go do something about it. So have you come across such client or someone, and what are the tips that you could share that, how we should, let them know that it is okay to ask for help and then go and do something about it?
Yeah, great question. And I probably was one of those guys for 20 years, to be honest with you. And a lot of guys don't talk about the stuff because it's very taboo in men's culture. But I think one of the things you can do is around that person is talk about mental health and just have open dialogues, not necessarily to that person directly, but it could be like, how are you going mentally today? Like, we've got a day here called Are You Okay Day, which it's a suicide prevention day that we have every year, but it's just a day where people talk about mental health. So you can have those like little discussions, particularly in the workplace is a great place, in your team meetings and stuff like that, doing like a bit of a well-being check-in. So, how's everyone going today on a scale of 1 to 5? You don't have to share the story, and just start those conversations. And what that does is it normalizes mental health discussions in the same way that we normalize physical health discussions. Like, if I was on the football field and I hurt my foot, I wouldn't hesitate to tell you I'm going to the doctor to get my foot checked. But so let's just do the same for our mental health. So that's one way you can do it. I often find in the mental health space, though, the change point happens when that person realizes, okay, now I need to go get some help. Now I need to start talking about it. And that can take, a long time for that person to realize it. So if that does happen, and just be there for them, hold the space. And if you say, are you okay? And they say, well, I'm not, then a great way to respond to that is just go, I'm here to listen, and just listen, and don't try to solve anything. Don't try to pinpoint the trigger points or anything. Just be quiet and just listen to the story, because often that's what people need, is someone just to listen to them, hear them, and value what they're saying. So it's a tricky one what you've raised there, but I think that normalizing the mental health discussions is a big way to encourage guys, particularly, to go, these guys are talking about mental health. Maybe I can start talking about it as well. It's a really good strategy that I've found over the years.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Brilliant. Thank you. So before we close, Simon, how can people find you, follow you, work with you if that's what they're looking for?
Yeah, sure. So from a therapy perspective, I can only service people in Australia. So social workers, we can only, I guess, do work in Australia. So people can access my therapy supports via my website. So it's www.mindful-men.com.au. And that's probably the best place to find me on all my socials, because I'm on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn. I'm debating whether or not to go TikTok. I'm not sure yet. But I've also got like the Mindful Men podcast on YouTube. It's on Spotify, Apple, and you can find all those links on my website as well.
Fantastic. That sounds like such a useful place for people to start, particularly for men to start if they are thinking that they need some help with their mental health. If you are not a man and that doesn't sound like the right thing for you, but you are still wanting to talk about tips around getting back in love with your work, stopping feeling burnt out, then do please feel free to reach out to me. If you're listening on LinkedIn, you can send me a DM directly. In fact, that's just the easiest way to find me. Jump on LinkedIn, send me a DM, and I'd be more than happy to chat. So it only remains to say thank you so much, Simon. I've really enjoyed talking to you today.
No, thanks for reaching out and letting me come on. I've really enjoyed coming on and sharing my story.
Amazing. And have an excellent rest of your evening. I hope you're able to get some good rest. And I will see everybody else again soon on one of these events, I hope.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.